Sure, appreciate it. Okay, we're getting hooked up on the video here with the Zoom. All right, Mr. Fosberg, you can hear us okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Mr. Leisman, you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. First and foremost, I'm Judge Sara Smolenski on the case with the Solon Township versus Rick Fosberg. There's 7 different files we're talking about. 20A 0187, 0191, 0194, 0192, 0196, and 0189. And then we also had a ticket that was, let's see if I got that right. 08, 05, 07, 08, 9, 91. Yeah, and then the other one was the failing to comply with a stop work order, 0185, if I didn't say that one. Anyways, what I was going to say was, Mr. Fosberg, on October 7, we had it set up to continue your trial on the criminal cases and to continue your formal hearing on the zoning violations. The Zoom, I think you contacted our court sometime later that day, indicating that you had some connection problem or internet problem, if I'm remembering it correctly. I set it up for 3:15 on October 7. We had Mr. Leisman, Mr. Gross, and Mr. Ellick from Solon Township as part of the Zoom. They connected right away. I'm not remembering exactly, and Mr. Leisman, you might have more of a memory of it, but I would say we probably waited 15 to 20 minutes. I tried calling you, Mr. Fosberg. I thought it was very unusual that you were not connected. And then we had, I moved it on and I said, well, I have to find out what's going on. I think it was later that day, either a call. I know physically you brought documents into the court building, and you'll probably remember better than I, but you wrote a note to me, you know, basically, well, I can get it and tell you exactly what you said. While it was scribbled on an envelope, a manila envelope, it was the next day, October 8th. I apologize, my internet did not work. I was sitting in front of my computer and thought I was all set. I have enclosed proof as well as other documents for evidence. I've been waiting a long time for this. Please give me another opportunity. Sincerely, Rick Fosberg. So I got that in an envelope that was sealed with Band-Aids, I might add. 2 Band-Aids. I've never had that happen before. Anyways, I told Mr. Leisman, I think my clerk called him, and I said, I'm rescheduling this one last time for you to present whatever information you want. We've had a lot of testimony on the case already, and you started your case, Mr. Fosberg, and you got through a lot of information, and basically I rescheduled it so we could finish. And now we're back to you finishing up whatever you want to say. You can do it by way of your own testimony, or you can do it by questioning either of the representatives from Solon Township if you so desire. Are you ready to continue now, Mr. Fosberg?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that basically the explanation of what happened October 7?
Is exactly it. We had I pulled up the computer and it showed your screen saying I was in the waiting room. And just before I could get that screen up, my computer kept telling me I had to install these different drivers to get it. So I called in at 3 o'clock. I didn't get through, but then all of a sudden I came onto the screen and it said that I was, you know, I thought I was all set. And then
Okay.
I noticed my phone had missed those calls from you. as I was
Did
messing with the
you
computer.
ever call Mr. Leisman?
No, I did not call Mr. Leisman.
Yeah.
I called just the office there.
Yeah,
In your honor, you'll recall, we tried calling him several times and we were in the Zoom hearing and nobody answered the call.
right. Well, it sounds like, Mr. Fosberg, our calls went through and you could see that we were calling, but somehow you couldn't get them.
Correct. It wasn't answering them properly. Was not ringing for me either. Same way.
Yeah.
Internet service was
Well, I will tell you that
not
Mr.
working.
Leisman at that time requested of the court for compensation from the township, for having to appear and be ready just like they are now. And I didn't make a final decision on that. We can address that in the end, but let's just get started and finish the case. Do you have anybody with you, Mr. Fosberg, that's going to testify besides you?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I
then
have
let's just
several
start with
names that I can
you.
give you that.
Let's just start with you
Okay.
and have you first raise your right hand. I put you under oath just like you were here in the courtroom. That's what these Zoom hearings are. You do solemnly swear you'll tell the truth,
Okay.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, fine. So you talked about being a licensed builder since 2005, saying you built a half a dozen homes in Solon Township, that you never thought you would ever have this problem. You wanted to build a home on this property and you were looking into buying it. You kept testifying that if Marsh Creek was allowed, you could have gotten a permit and you didn't have to worry about the bridge. You said you got a permit from the health department for well and septic, and that you came in late January to the township to get permits. And you talked about when Mr. Gross worked on what days and when you could talk to him. Let's see, you talked about the road commission and how they renamed the address and the issue with that. You talked about applying for a variance and whether you'd need that. And you said that Mr. Gross told you you didn't need the variance. You purchased the property in February of 2020. And in September, you still did not have a permit. You testified that you told Mr. Gross you were having people come and starting to work on it. And you know that Mr. Alec came and put up stop orders on more than one occasion. And you've talked a lot about the roads having to have maintenance and upkeep for rescue and emergency. That was obviously one of the big issues the township raised, that you couldn't get the permit because the bridge wasn't in a stable condition to handle rescue and emergency vehicles. You talked about after the first stop work order, you actually met with Mr. Gross and Mr. Alec, and they told you you needed a survey. And you really felt confident that the survey you had was good. They said they couldn't accept it unless it was stamped. You were using Rosine Surveying, and you ultimately did get it stamped. You did continue, and you admitted to continue building the property, the pole barn or the facility, whatever it's called, and you thought that you were doing the right thing. And it wasn't until the court had a phone call with you that you said you stopped work and you haven't worked on it since. You also testified I wasn't trying to do anything illegal. You had sold your home. You were under time pressures. You needed 90 days to move all your stuff. You were hoping to get it in that barn, but then all of this happened. You had to hire a storage unit. And you even mentioned at one time in your testimony that Mr. Alec from the township was saying, we're not going to make this easy for you. Somehow you gave the impression that you somehow thought that the township of Solon was kind of out to get you. You talked a lot about the easement and how if the road was centered in the easement, you wouldn't be having what's it called, Mr. Leisman, when you have to be further back?
Setback.
The setback requirements. And you talked a lot, Mr. Fosberg, about if you could be in the center of that easement and the road would be changed a little bit. And pretty much that's what I got. Now
Yes,
go
ma'am.
ahead and
That's
start saying what you
really,
want to
really close.
say. Let you say what you want to say, and then Mr. Leesman gets to question you as well.
Okay. All right, if we go back to like the beginning there, then that's what it was, is why I started working on it. I had all my information in. I talked to him actually in December, and then went in to apply for all the building permit in January 17th. And Mr. Alec had me get a few more documents for him. He wanted, well, it was another set of prints and then trust designs. So I got him that, and I had that back in just another couple days after that. And then he said that they were waiting for a zoning permit for me. And then other than that, then I was all set. So it was on, that was before I even purchased the property. February, I think it was like 9th or something like that, I purchased the property. And then I went back in. I was in there again on the February 19th to try to obtain that same building permit. And same thing, was basically told, waiting on the zoning. But I did try to get the rest of my permits too, because that's a building permit. Is then you also have to buy your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing and that. So I had some of that information filled out, and I wanted to just get my other permits as well. And they went ahead and I paid for the electrical permit. They gave me the electrical permit for the barn, but the other ones I didn't have them quite filled out enough. So I didn't get them paid for, but I did obtain the electrical one for it. And he just said that it's just because of what was going on with this property, that they thought it was something different, that it wasn't a buildable piece. And from what I was showing them or whatever, that it is a buildable piece, but they had to talk to their lawyer or something, because something with the zoning, but also that something would have to be done with the bridge. And I said, well, I got that, I showed the other easement coming off of, because what I obtained, I went down to the road commission before I even purchased it, and that was just the days before that, and asked them about it, the easements, trying to find the easements, because they're really hard to find these easements. A lot of times they're title companies are really the only ones that like record them, so it could get taken off of there or whatnot, and it's really hard to find. But anyhow, the road commission does had the easements shown to head back into my property there, and it shows it as being Marsh Creek. And I don't know how exactly that, like Mr. Leeson was able to put them on the computer, if I scan them or put them on there, but for evidence. But I gave you in that folder, that vanilla folder has all of that information in there. And basically, if you see it, it's exactly, it was a picture that I took from. It was
Your Honor, I'm going to object that he's referring to documents that have not been provided to the plaintiff. I can't, and I think it's improper if we don't have access, any type of access to documents.
Well, I got
all these papers.
I don't think it's anything different than we've already looked at already, but I'm asking you, Mr. Fosberg, are you referring to photographs right now?
I'm referring to the photograph that I have that shows the Marsh Creek going through, and I talked with Mr. Cole, and he was the one that he's the one that told me to take the picture of it, because I said, how do I prove to the township that is Marsh Creek Road? And he's the one that told me to take a picture of it, because it was right directly from a plot book from 1967. And then also,
well, I get what you're
they
saying.
all have the same information. I gave them the same exact information. Every drop of what I have here that I'm showing you, that I'm trying to put in evidence.
Road Commission, correct?
Correct. Yep, he's the senior land specialist from the road commission.
Okay, well, you could have subpoenaed him to be here to testify if you wanted to have him say what he wanted to say. My inquiry is, what you're saying right now isn't different from what you've already said. Your position is there was a way to have access to that property without the bridge.
Correct.
Right, and
That's
we've
correct.
talked about that. We've seen a lot of
Okay, I
different
just want to make
maps.
sure that,
Right, but that's not
okay,
for my hearing right now. That's not for my hearing right now. That's for you to get that squared away, to get permission to have Marsh Creek be the ingress and egress through the township. I mean, there are avenues that have to be followed for you to get that permission to do it. And I'm not saying it's impossible. That's not what I'm here to decide today. Okay, what else did you want to say, Mr. Fosberg? What Mr. Leisman is
basically
objecting to
that,
is he's objecting to you saying what some other guy is saying. That's why we have people appear and testify. But this, what you're testifying about, is not new. I have heard this. I feel like I get
okay,
what you're saying.
okay. Okay, I just wanted to be, that's it. I just make sure that, cause we explain it, just make sure that everyone's aware that basically that's, I was
Right.
under, in fact, I was told by not only them, but also the Kent County Register of Deeds that Marsh Creek and my road are the same road. And they, like I said, they also gave me the address for it as well, which I had put that in as evidence as well, the address assignment. If you
And
also
you're
look
saying
at the
Marsh Creek and 72nd.
Marsh Creek and Simmons are the same road,
Simmons.
correct?
Okay.
And I have various documents that you also have there as well, and they also have the same exact documents, well, that are shown in, that show that those are the same. And one of the reasons too is they go back against the ordinances, and the ordinances specifically say about like a drive. Like, see, one of the things is they want me to do a bunch extra to a drive, or like I have to put a driveway in or whatever. But like according to, if you were to put a private road in, all these things have to get accepted by them. And then after it's accepted, it's usually just a matter of maintenance. It's not a matter of like putting a whole new road or avenue in, you know.
Yeah, but I
what
mean,
they show me that's
realistically, Mr. Fosberg, it just seems like putting the cart before the horse. You're saying all this stuff like a private road just has to be accepted by the township, but you went ahead and started your building before you got the final answer on all that.
Well, I
Even
started
today,
building because they told me that I was going to get my building permit. There was no problem.
You
They said,
thought it
yes,
would-
it is a buildable piece. And
Yeah,
I
you
have
thought it
they
would
gave
be
me the
good.
electrical application. I paid
Right.
for that. Why would
Yeah.
they not give me the building permit if they give me the electrical application, the permit? I paid for that permit already. I mean,
Right. And we
and
can
like I
ask,
said, the health department, I already got the well and septic. I've already paid for the well and septic. I've already paid for the driveway permit. And every single person that I talked to says there's no reason why you cannot be building on there right now.
Same
In
objection.
fact,
Your
if it were a
hearsay.
driveway issue, that it would be something that would be just required before occupancy, not before of starting building even. Because nobody puts a driveway in usually and gets it all final graded until building's in. And,
okay,
you know,
all right. Okay,
and just like as far as them wanting me to move the barn, I mean, I have right here in their ordinances that they wrote. In fact, you have the same information that explains that if nothing, basically, I can read it out loud here, sitting here, but it explains that if nothing gets changed and nothing gets messed up as far as the drive that's already there, then the township can say they have the yay or nay to it. They can say they can approve it with no problem whatsoever just by saying that it's not going to affect anybody else, you know. And I think that the reason why I'm talking about the road so much going in is because basically that in December when they told me that when I found that easement coming in, that was the reason of my basis was that I didn't have to do to the bridge, and that was the reason why so I was not something I was waiting for my building permit. It's just what I'm trying to get established, is that I wasn't waiting for anything like that for a building permit. I was just whatever they asked for, which I gave them every single thing. So basically, I was just waiting for the zoning guy to talk to the legal person so they could write it up properly to give me my permit. I also have a permit that you pull up as a general standard from Lara, which is licensing regulations, and it says that no work will be committed, will be done on it until that has been submitted. So it's basically vague. It's saying that if outside it is submitted, and if they ain't asking me for any more information, that it was able to start working on it. So like I said, and I haven't had, they gave me the electrical permit and everything, and it wasn't until after I purchased the property that they're saying, oh, that the Marsh Creek is now not my road. It's now my road is the 2-track on the side, but Solon Township's the only one telling me that. Then they say there's no gravel lots, so you'd have to do the whole road, but they're the only ones telling me that 2-track is my easement because according to, like I said, the road commission, and I got 3 different names here from the Register of Deeds office, which all state that is Marsh Creek is that road. And if it's not put in, it's because they don't, he said, the road commission said they don't oversee it, so it could get put in wrong because the township's the one that's supposed to oversee it. But according to what was planned out, that what they have on paper right there is what's planned out. But somebody down there has forged a bunch of stuff too, because I can tell you that road really was not there in 1967, because I have a map from 1971 and it shows no road there at Marsh Creek whatsoever. Marsh Creek was actually put in 2002. So them being the same on there, I don't know. But I also have 4 different libers on the gentleman that lives right next to me, and there is, my road was supposed to have been Marsh Creek, Middle Lake Road coming back in, and it got blocked off. And there's issues that somebody blocked it off there, is what I believe now is why they're not giving me any access, because like if you were to put a road in, you have to turn it over to them. They're the ones that tell you how they want it. You have to turn it over to them. I mean, the 2-track that comes in doesn't have one single stitch of gravel on it, so there's no way that was ever a road to begin with. If you look at some pictures that I gave you, it's totally, and here's another picture of right next door to me on Middle Lake. I mean, this right here is people's backyards. That is county park right there. Park there. But all these people, they don't even own waterfront property, but I do. I pay almost as much for my
try to have it connect to your situation. We're getting a little bit far afield.
Just that saying that the township seems to do whatever they feel is they want to do, but not what is right.
That can be your beef. I don't doubt that. That's like I used before. I think I used the example of a guy who gets a speeding ticket and he wonders why the other 2 guys that went by him didn't get it. But I get what you're saying. What else do you want to address as it relates to the substance of your cases?
And basically that's pretty much it, Your Honor. And basically, at each time that I was, they came out for a no work order, I addressed it. Like I said, the first time I went in and spoke with them and asked me what I needed. The second time I was right there, because they weren't open. It's the only reason I went out there, and trying to get the stuff done. So
are you saying after the first, Mr. Fosberg, are you saying after the first, I had referred to this in my kind of analysis at the beginning of my talk today. After the first stop order, you went in and met with Mr. Gross and Mr. Ellick.
Right.
Then are you saying after the second stop order went up, you went back and met with them again?
No, but when they came out to
see them at the scene.
Put that on. I seen them at the scene, and I had the information that they wanted.
So you talked to them at the scene.
I did not start until I had that information.
Okay, all right, I understood that, and I didn't want to get mixed up on that. All right, now Mr. Leisman has some questions for you, and then I'll still give you an opportunity to wrap up anything after if stuff comes up that you hadn't thought of. Listen to his questions and try to answer those. I have a couple of questions that I have, but go ahead, Mr. Leisman.
Thank you, Mr. Fosberg. You applied for a building permit to build a home on the property, right?
Right.
And did the township ever give you that permit?
No, they have not. They told me I was going to get it.
And you applied for a permit for the accessory building, right?
Correct. At the same time. Yeah.
Did you ever get the permit to build the accessory building?
No, I have not had any permit.
All right, and you're a builder,
was told I
so
was gonna get them all.
you are a builder and you're familiar with the requirements of the state construction code.
Correct.
Right? And so you started this building in March, right? Early in March, you started building your accessory building.
That's correct.
And you knew that you didn't have a permit when you started the building, correct?
I knew I'd already given them all the information they needed, and it's always
That's
just.
not my
waiting for the
question.
permit
Please answer the
paperwork.
question. The question, Mr. Fosberg, is you
I did not
knew
have
that you
permit in
did not
hand,
have
no.
a permit.
You guys, you
I did not
can't
have the
talk over.
paper in hand.
Hold on. We're recording everything and it makes it difficult if you talk over each other. It's hard enough when we have masks on. But could you just listen to the question? You state the question, Mr. Leisman, then let him finish talking before you start another question. But Mr. Fosberg, don't talk over each other. Okay, the question was, you started building the accessory in early March. You said yes. And the question was that you knew you did not have a building permit when you started. Is that what the question was? You do not have a building permit when you started building the accessory building?
Yes.
Okay,
do you understand the question?
Yeah, and basically, as far as I'm concerned, I had my building permit. I've already had given all the stuff for it. Basically, I was just in the waiting process of it. I've never not gotten one before.
So my question, Mr. Fosberg, is a yes or no question. Did you have a permit when you started building the building? You're under oath. Did you have a permit or didn't you? Or
No, sir, I did not have permit in hand, but I had already filled out paperwork and already been told I'm going to get it, waiting upon approval.
Then after that, on three occasions, the township came and posted stop work orders, right?
Correct. And each occasion, I addressed the situation, did not start working on it until I got it, what they had requested.
So the stop work order was posted and you continued to work on the building.
Yeah, we're in COVID and they're only work 3 days a week or 2 days a week or whatever. So yeah, I made sure I had what information they needed before I began working on it again. Yep.
No further questions, Your Honor, although I do have a rebuttal witness for a short issue.
That's fine. Mr. Fosberg, were you as a builder ever aware that you're not allowed to build an accessory building before you actually get the permit for the primary building?
As long as you apply for the 2 permits at the same time, they'll give you you can okay to build your primary. My last house that I did in Solon Township, I was approved to build a pole barn before the house.
So in this case, did you apply for both the permanent residence primary building? I'll just call it your house.
Yeah.
Would this be a house you'd
Yes,
live
ma'am, I
in?
did. Correct, yes.
Did you apply for the primary permanent residence? Let me just ask the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you apply for the permanent primary residence and the accessory building permit at the same time?
Yes, ma'am. I did.
And when you got the ticket that said you started the accessory structure without the principal structure being allowed, truly speaking, you didn't have a permit for either one, the primary building or whatever they call it, the residence, or the accessory building, correct? I mean, physically you didn't have the permits, but you thought, You thought you'd done all the
It all been
underlying,
submitted.
you thought you'd submitted everything, and as far as you're concerned, you thought you're just in a waiting process.
Correct.
Now, were you of the opinion that you were getting the permit for the accessory building and the primary residence, or just the accessory building?
Both. I was gonna get them both.
You got the impression that you were gonna get a permit to build the permanent residence and the accessory.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And
I had
when
already
you-
I already did my own septic for my house. That was almost $1,000. So, I mean, I would only do that for putting in a house, and that was done before asking for a permit for the barn. So yeah, I was getting them for both.
And is the septic permits you get through the township?
You get them through the health department, but they're
So they're
required
not
before
through the
you can build.
township, they're
And-
through
and
the
I got
health
the-
department.
That's correct.
Okay,
And
And you
I have
talked
the
about-
paper that Solon Township,
go ahead.
they have like an informational letter, which tells you what you're required from you as a homeowner or builder or whatever for paperwork. And basically, it spells out everything that they want. One of them is the well and septic permit and also a driveway permit. So I had both of those
And you're
already.
saying that letter, you're
prior
saying
to-
that letter is a informational letter sent by the township?
Right.
And that's a letter that's kind of generic that would go to any builder anywhere?
That's correct.
Okay, and when you talked about the driveway permit, who do you get that from?
Road Commission.
And when you talk about the electrical, who do you get
Yes, ma'am.
that permit through?
The township.
That's through Solon Township?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then getting back to, you keep saying, I knew that you had provided all the documents, and when you saw the stop work order, which you saw all three of them, you believed you met their requirements so that you could continue working and building. Can you elaborate and
That is
explain
correct.
what you mean by that? When the work
Okay, the
stop
first time
order
they
is up,
said that. Yep, they come out and put a stop work order up. I went in and met with them, and I said, they said that we need a survey from you. I said, okay. I said, I don't know why you guys didn't ask for it way back, when I applied for the building permit, but so be it. I went ahead and started to get the survey. It takes a little bit of time. But as I started doing that, I found in my paperwork from my title company that I had a survey from it that I just, I forgot about. So, but I couldn't turn it into them because they were closed that day. So I went ahead and continued working. I figured, because they told me right out, and I should subpoena the people, I guess, but I have 3 witnesses, the people that you've seen in the pictures that were working with me, the one girl and the 2 gentlemen, all were there, and heard them say, all I need is my building, all I needed was my survey, and they would give me my building permit. So when I found my survey, I was excited. I called up Rosine, I'm not going to pay you because that's something that's not really inquired, but I never really have to do that. I just use the old one. I've never had it, out of all the houses I built, never, had them ask for a survey like that until the end when you sell it or whatever. But
when you say,
so I went ahead
okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So basically, I had what I thought was, it's a survey that I was handed. It's what my bank accepted. And so I figured I had exactly the information that they needed. And so it was all on hand. They told me that, so that's all I was needing to keep on going. So, I mean, I can continue punching away at it, and I had it on hand. So if I seen them before Monday rolled around that I was going to go in there and turn it all into them, then it would be no big deal. They'd come there and I'd show them that, and then we'd be all set. But it was.
And that
they
was
came there
just the
and-
first stop work order, correct?
Correct. And they came there and said that they would not accept that because that was not stamped. So I had to get the
Right.
stamped one. So I went ahead and got a stamped one. So then the next time I have a stamped one, they're coming in again. I said, I got a stamped one here. Then he says he wanted it. He also wanted the easement surveyed on there from road to road, which is from 22 mile all the way to Simmons Road, which is several miles. So I had that all surveyed. And then when I brought that back into him, he said he'd like my house and the barn also surveyed down there. So now that I'm on the third time, that's when I asked him, I said, why don't you just ask for all that at the same time? And he said, I'm not going to make it easy for you. So that was the comment where I got that comment from. And I just said that it's obvious or not, because I said, build over a dozen houses. I've never been required to have a survey like this, or I've never been put through any of this.
Well, is it fair to say throughout your work as a builder, you've never had a stop work order?
Yes, it is.
You've never experienced having anything posted on
I've never had any issues, and you know what? Nope. And I've started every single one of them, and I have not had anything posted. No paperwork posted when I started them. Any one of them. And I built over
Mr.
15
Fosberg,
houses.
what I was trying to inquire was, never before this experience have you ever had a stop work order posted at one of your construction sites. True?
Never.
Is that true?
Never had.
Okay. And this time you had 3 separate
That's true.
stop
Never
work
had.
orders. Okay. And at this construction, which was your personal residence, you had 3 stop work orders posted on the site, sometimes when you were there. True?
That's correct. And it just blows my mind. I don't even understand it. I feel like
Okay.
it almost just feels like I was like,
Did you
I
ever
was told
know?
one thing, but then I'm getting something different from it.
Did you ever know that that's a criminal case? Did you ever talk to anybody in the building world, in the construction business, to talk about what to do when there's a stop work order?
Well, I know if you're going like against something that they're telling you that you can't do, but they weren't telling me that I can't do it. They just told me that I needed this information in order to.
I'm just asking what you knew about what a stop
Yeah, I
work
mean, I
order
know that
meant.
if you're going,
Because what I'm hearing you say is that you thought you did everything to comply. After each stop work order, you thought you
Right.
did what you needed to comply, so you just kept working. Is that fair
well,
to
it was
say
the
it that
COVID
way?
also went on. It was the first one, and then the COVID.
I'm not doubting COVID caused some of the problems,
Right.
but you
Right.
really
I
thought,
definitely thought that I had all of the information and we was 100% in the right to go ahead and
Okay.
do what I was.
if we could go back for a second to when you first bought the property or thinking about it, when you started knowing it was available, or how you found out it was for sale, when you started doing your work to see if you could have lake access, or how much property you had to buy, whether this was buildable. Like, I don't know how much research you did ahead of time. I don't know if you went through a
Wait a
realtor
minute.
or just the owner of the property. But wouldn't you look into it, like, totally, before you'd sign, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on this property?
Oh yeah, definitely. I looked into it really hard, and I asked their opinions, and Bob did say that he wouldn't buy that piece. He said, and he had mentioned that the bridge had to be updated. That was before I found the easement, and that was before I purchased it too. And then when I found the easement, both Jerry and Mr. Ellick, Bob there said that they thought I was on something. That if that's the case, the exact words from Jerry's mouth said, if you did not forge this, if this is true, what you got here on paper, then we will give you a building permit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not true.
And in the
But
end, you
what I
never
gave him
got
was true,
the,
according to.
I'm sorry.
I never have got a building permit. I still do not.
So you never
And I
got the
have,
building permit?
I've got almost $60,000 invested in here, everything that I got. I'm living with a
Well,
friend
that's
right
why
now.
I'm
And I
asking.
have all my
That's why
investment
I'm
stuff in
asking,
storage.
because
Yeah.
I remember talking to you on the telephone, which you testified in the previous hearing, that when you heard from me, you stopped working altogether and you've not worked on it since. I don't know the date of
Right.
that, maybe April or something. But I remember talking with you on the phone, indicating that we didn't have the case heard, we hadn't taken any testimony, I didn't have any of the details, but that the worst scenario is if you're building something without a permit, you'd have to dismantle it. I remember saying the worst scenario for you would be you'd have to take the barn down. So I was trying to encourage you, stop all work on it. And you were saying at that point you did. My question was,
Yeah.
with the thousands of dollars that you've invested in this, wouldn't you know before you sign on the dotted line to buy it, that you know for sure you can do what you wanted? Because honestly, right to this day, you haven't been able to do what you wanted. You still don't have the permits
No,
to do
you're
what
right,
you
man.
wanted. Yeah,
That's correct.
okay. But you never
here's one
sought
thing
out
is I
any,
went in,
okay, go ahead.
I mean, out of all the pieces I bought, and like I said, I've done over 15 of them, and all never that I've been charged with buying the police property to building the house on and everything, and then turning around reselling it or living in it or whatnot. But I've never ran into this problem, and I've always checked in very thoroughly. I also had a realtor. The realtor told me that it's buildable, as well as there's a title company there.
Yeah.
And
That sounds like a
everybody's
whole
told me
nother
that,
lawsuit.
including the township. Including
Right.
the township. Now, see, if I
Right,
were to
I
go
get that. Right.
into Kentland, for
Uh-huh.
example, and they say, yeah, it's buildable. I mean, I don't really ask them to put it in writing for me. I just trust what they tell me.
Right.
So now, if I would have had them guys at Solon Township put it in writing, I could prove to you that, yeah, I was
Right.
going to build on this piece because they told me I could. But without that in writing, I don't have, it's my word against theirs, but I would never have bought a piece of property for all that money without somebody telling me from the township that, yes, I can build on that piece of property. I would never have done that in a million years. So,
Right.
I mean, and
Okay,
if
let
you
me
look at the
take you
taxes,
back to the
what they're taxing
testimony.
that piece of property, it's definitely a buildable piece according to that. And that's what Jerry Gross told me too, because there's some cheaper tax parcels that are close by. And I said, why are these so cheaper? Their taxes, is it so much less? And he said, because they're not able to build on those. So.
If you're going by tax information on whether a land is buildable or not, that's not doing your homework enough. But let me just ask you this. We had testimony earlier about a separate neighbor that was denied to build because the private road would not accommodate emergency vehicles. In your investigation to purchase this property, did you ever look into that? Or are you saying the first time you heard about the bridge not being safe enough to accommodate emergency vehicles is when you had applied for your permit? Do you get my question?
I knew that the bridge was, I knew the bridge was not able to, it would have to be updated in order to use that route. So I had not purchased the piece, and I went in and I found on the deed that it shows another easement coming in, which then I went to the road commission and they told me, yes, it's Marsh Creek. I went to the registered deeds. They told me, yes, it's Marsh Creek. So I did all my homework. They all will tell me right now it's Marsh Creek.
So you put all your effort into Marsh Creek and Simmons was the same road, and that easement would avoid having to update the bridge.
Correct.
Yes?
Yes, that's 100%
Okay,
correct.
I understand. Okay, Mr. Leisman, do you have any other questions for Mr. Fosberg?
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Fosberg, is there anything else final that you want to say?
Yeah, just one thing is basically like it said that in the past too, as far as the moving of where the driveway and my barn sit, as far as the easement and the setbacks.
Yep.
the township has right to be able to move it if they want to. And also, if you move the easement over how many feet it needs to, which I'd have a professional surveyor move it over on the survey, then we have it documented. The road doesn't even need to be moved over because the road is still inside of the easement and it plops one side to the other. So the road does not even need to be moved in order to move that easement. So it would not affect anybody's travel or anybody's sightseeing, anything, because the road actually is not actually moving, just the easement. So I don't really see where I should be required to have everybody's okay on moving it. The township can just say, yeah, it's just all a matter of documentation, not in the road. And then number two is that I was told by, like I said, L.R. Cole, which is a senior property representative at the road commission, that Marsh Creek and Simmons are the same road. And that is also, he also gave me the address of Marsh Creek. And
This isn't new. This isn't new. This isn't new information for me. You've said this many times. Yeah, I get it. Kind of a wrap up, but you've said that already.
I'm sorry.
And you were saying, you don't have to be sorry. I'm just trying to get to the point. You've also said before that you did not believe to change the easement, which would not necessarily have to move the road at all, that you would have to go and get the approval from all the other neighbors. Your position was that you believed the township could just give you that allowance.
That's correct.
Okay, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So then, Mr. Fosberg, do you have any other witnesses with you at your home or anywhere else that we're going to have to hear from anybody else on this?
No, one other thing I'd like to put in the evidence that is basically that kind of the simple factors that I got right here, that it's the minutes they have that you can have for the meetings. One of the minutes is the one from when the neighbor, he put his barn in, and it was just some hype on that. But the
What
one
year was
I'm
it?
concerned about is when he put his barn in, and see if you're. Can you find that on there? Oh, that's not that. That's his one. His was done several years back.
And would it be
But,
the
there
meetings
was
from the
also-
township meeting? Like, what was the name of it? Like the zoning commission, or what's the meeting?
Minutes of the Board of Trustees, special meeting of the Board of Trustees.
And is there a date?
Mine is March 31st. There was a special meeting of the Board of Trustees, and it was concerning
What
my
year?
property. And that was this year, 2020.
2020 of March
31st,
31?
2020. Yep.
Okay. And what's the point?
And it was basically, if you were to read it, it pretty much sounds like they're trying to stop me from, the township itself is trying to, because the way they say it, I'd like to read it out here. Just trying to find it.
And this would have been about a month and a half after you bought it?
Correct.
Were you at that
So
meeting?
basically, after I started myself,
Yes.
I was not there.
So
I was
you
not
heard
invited
about it
either.
later? You heard about it later?
Yep, a friend of mine that I'm actually at his house right now found it for me on the minutes are public information.
Okay. And what's the point you're
found
trying
it
to
in that
make about that?
information. It basically states in there that the residents on there, the two next door neighbors are saying how that, how can they sue me for the road, or I'm messing the road up, or how they can try to get so that I can't build, and
Hold on a second. Hold on. I missed what you said. I'm sorry, Mr. Fosberg. I'm having trouble hearing you. It's raining like heck out here, and we're on the second floor, and it sounds like it's hitting the
Okay.
roof. You said that the minutes reflect
the neighbors
something.
basically expressed,
The neighbors expressed,
the neighbors expressed how that I was trying to damaging the road or something. And then they're going back and forth with the attorney, trying to say, well, this is what,
Okay,
is right here. It's
on
March
that
16th,
date of that
2020.
meeting, you would have already started building the accessory building, correct? By
Correct, I
the
just
date
started
of that
building it,
March
right?
31
Yep.
meeting?
This meeting is actually from March 16th, 2020.
Oh, you told me March 31. So March
it's-
16,
I know, I made
that's
a mistake.
fine. I'm
Yep,
just,
and
I
it-
get that you were
and it
not at
was-
the meeting.
Right, we're invited, but basically, it's basically trying to, what they could do to stop me. It says, Mr. Swayze asked the board, what's the likely result of the stop work order? And supervisor said, it currently appears the judge may end up deciding that. Then he asked what information the judge will need to see, because I'm messing up the road. And the supervisor said that basically the township is basically pertains to right of way, and not anything else that is civil matter. And then the other guy asked, well, what's the typical timeline for that? And then supervisor there says, depends on the judge. Recent matters have taken up to 2 years to get close to a resolution. It starts with tickets and then goes from there. Stop work orders can be handled differently by the judge because it involves access. And then they're trying to say, well, it's a safety issue. Propane company can't get in there and all this and that. But basically,
What,
they're
when did you
basically,
when did you become aware that they were talking about it at the meeting?
2 months later.
Okay,
May,
so
probably
March,
end of
April,
or
May.
so.
Did you ever have any of the neighbors in that area try to contact you directly to say, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, they had, and I told them what I was doing, and they basically were trying to say that I was messing up the road or whatever, but by heavy equipment coming in. But I told them I didn't have any heavy equipment come in. I brought the barn in and 2 loads on my pickup truck with a flatbed trailer. So, and I have 2 machines there with a backhoe and a bobcat. They got hauled there
Okay.
way before, all frozen. So,
Okay, all right, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right, Mr. Leisman, you said you had a rebuttal testimony that you wanted to present. Who's that?
Both Mr. Gross and Mr. Ellick, but they will be short.
Who do you want to go first?
Well, Mr. Gross is in the chair, so why don't we go with him?
That's fine. Mr. Gross, can you please raise your right hand? You do solemnly swear you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Leisman.
Your Honor, if I could,
Jerry.
I would like to share the screen again to pull up the exhibits that were previously admitted into evidence.
Uh-huh. Can you just refer to the number?
Am I sharing now?
Yes?
Well, because I would like to be able to ask Mr. Gross questions.
I just want to know what number the exhibit is. 1?
Exhibit number 1.
Mr. Fosberg, you see that, don't you?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Leisman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gross, you heard Mr. Fosberg testify about Marsh Road and that he claims that he has access on Marsh Road.
That is correct.
Right. I'm showing you exhibit number 1, just so that we can illustrate for the court. So Marsh Creek Road.
Yeah, okay.
Marsh Creek Road runs where I have my cursor going up and down, correct?
That is correct.
And then there's an easement over the property line to the, what direction is this?
That would be to the west of, or sorry, to the east of.
To the east of Marsh Creek Road. And this is where the easement comes down, as far as you know, that connects into the road that comes off Simmons.
That is correct.
All right. The defendant claims that this easement goes far enough over that he can actually access Marsh Creek, the paved road, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
All right. And I now want to show you exhibit number 3, which is previously admitted exhibit. This was the exhibit where the defendant gave a survey from Rosine.
That is correct.
All right. And right at the top is where we're looking at that, is where this easement comes in, And how far does this easement extend on each side of the property line?
At that point, it's 30-foot wide, and it extends either side of the east property line until it cuts onto the properties of the people where it's located at Simmons.
So it's 15 feet on each side of the property line here.
That's correct.
And then to the north, right here, it's hard to see on this one, but according to his survey, when it runs along Marsh Creek Road, how far does it go over the property line?
It's 40-foot wide there, 20 foot either side of the property line.
All right, so in order to access that paved portion of Marsh Creek, that paved portion would need to be within the 20 foot that he claims his easement and his survey shows goes over the line. Correct?
That is correct.
Did you do an investigation to determine whether or not the paved portion of the road was within 20 feet of the property line?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, I'm showing you what's now been marked as exhibit number 21. Can you explain for the court what this post is?
That post is indicated to be the center line of the property line,
Right,
which would be the center line for the easement.
Okay, so this is the center line of the easement, the property line. So this is the actual easement that comes down, and then he has 20 feet over this way.
That is correct.
All right. Did you and Mr. Ellick measure how far the roadway was away from the center line?
Yes, we did.
How far was that?
The measurement that we have right there is 20 foot where Mr. Ellick's hand is, and I'm facing straight back from the property line. It's approximately 2 foot shy of being within the easement the roadway was.
All right, so the paved portion of the roadway lies 2 feet outside of the easement that he's claiming.
Approximately, yes.
All right, so in other words, he does not have access to use the paved portion of Marsh Creek.
That is correct.
In fact, these trees are blocking that portion of it.
They're in the easement, but yes, they would prevent it from going through there.
All right, so if we go back to the original number 1, is he demonstrated to the township that he has access rights to come down this road to access his property?
That is not correct based on the records that I could find.
All right. No further questions for Mr. Gross, Your Honor.
All right, you can keep that map up if you want, if it's going to help Mr. Fosberg. Mr. Fosberg, do you have any questions for Jerry Gross on just that issue? We didn't lose him, did we?
I just
Mr.
want to ask
Foster?
Mr. Gross if he knows how the roads, when the roads are created, if they know how the roads are created, because Marsh Creek was put in after the easement that goes back to my property.
Okay, so just let's stay with that question, Mr. Fosberg. Mr. Fosberg, let's just stay with that question.
Okay.
Does Mr. Gross know how the roads are put in?
Yes, I do. They are created with the approval of the township. In the surveys and the prints and plans for the road to be put in for Marsh Creek, it indicates that the center line of Marsh Creek is going to be 35 foot from the property line. The road itself is 22 foot wide. If you take that 11 foot from the 35, that's going to leave about 22 foot, give or take a little. And therefore, it wouldn't.
Okay, but the question I'm asking is in the whole gist of that road, it's not just the surface of the road. How much of that road is being taken up when they prepared that to make that Marsh Creek?
The road right of way, as they put it in, may come onto the easement. But the paved portion itself, as indicated, is not on the easement, so therefore you would have no right to pass on it without their permission.
I understand that, but who gives somebody permission to ruin the easement that I'm supposed to drive on so that they can have a nice tarred road there. Because my easement was there first, and it was supposed to be approved through you guys the same way Marsh Creek was. It was supposed to be approved as being a road. It's on my deed as being a private road, but there's not a drop of gravel there. There's trees there, and in fact,
multiple compound questions.
the picture that was.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, I can't have you talk over each other. Can you get rid of the map, Mr. Leisman? Mr. Fosberg, I just want you to put your question in that form. Because really all you're doing is testifying, and we are repeating. We're repeating a lot of what we've gone over.
Okay.
You are of the utmost belief that Marsh Creek and Simmons give you the opportunity to have access to your property so as not to have to rebuild the bridge. You are saying that before Marsh Creek even existed, your piece of property had an easement that went all the way out there that should still exist. I get that.
Yes, ma'am.
What question do you have for Mr.
But the question is that
Gross?
Mr. Gross is that when, because
What's the question?
Doing construction my whole life, the question I'm asking you, Mr. Gross, is how much has to be done in order to put that road in order to put the drain easements in and everything that go take the road's water and everything away? Where does all that go, and where's it put in?
You're asking for the physical work that's being done to put Marsh Creek in as a paved road?
And the reason being is because where that drainage easement is the part that's my road. You cannot put a road on top of it. They will not allow it. It's a drainage easement.
Okay.
It's where the drains are.
All right, you guys are getting too far. You're getting too far afield, Mr. Fosberg, about prior to Marsh Creek existing. We're talking really about February when you bought the property. I'm not going back 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. That could be a separate lawsuit if you felt that the township did something wrong when that Marsh Creek was built and they supposedly gave approval for it, and whether it affected your easement. I just want to know what questions, if any, you have for Mr. Gross, so we can wrap that part up. I understand the basic concept that you're saying.
The question
Mr.
I have,
Fosberg.
Mr. Gross, is does he believe that Marsh Creek did damage to my easement that went in there?
I'm not in a position to make that determination.
That's my question, Mr. Gross.
Okay, that's fine. All right, Mr. Leisman, do you have any other questions?
The last
from
picture that was just before that we
Yes?
showed, the picture with Mr.
Alec holding the measurement?
The picture that was on the last picture that showed the tape measure of Mr. Alec holding.
Yes?
Right, and you seen those trees that were right there? Those are dead in the center of the property line. Those are ornamental trees that are planted, and there's also a barbed wire fence that's right there that have all been put in by the neighbor at the end. And I just wondered if that was okay in their guidelines to have that like that.
That's the question for Mr. Gross?
Yeah.
Mr. Gross, do you
Is that
know who
okay
planted those trees?
If I had an easement, can I put trees in?
The location of the easement itself does not prevent a tree from being in it. It allows for the easement to be there. I don't know who planted them in. They are fairly new growth, but I can't tell you when they were there or what permission it was. It does not change the status of the easement.
Okay.
In order, listening to, reading your ordinances that you guys put in place, does it or does it not state on your ordinances that in any easement that you can't do anything other than plant some grass on it? You can't change the elevation of it. You can't do anything other than plant grass on it.
I have no knowledge of what you're talking about. The point is that an easement.
I can show it in paper.
This answers questions.
Okay.
We're gonna go forever.
It's basically like saying, see, because I had an easement that goes right across my property, the piece of property that I'm not allowed to do anything on right now that I paid all this money for. That I could go there and put something across the center of that easement there because it's my piece of property, right?
That's not a
But
question.
that's illegal.
Okay. All right, so
what I'm saying
the
is
last
the
question
township
was,
has allowed my easement to get destroyed They've allowed mine to get destroyed. So wouldn't it be their fault, the reason why I can't
No
build that?
objection, Your Honor, it's
Because
not
they
true,
destroyed
there's
the
no
house.
foundation,
Right.
it's not a
It's really
question.
it's just really argumentative. I understand the objection. I'm just trying to get through the cross-examination of the rebuttal witness. Are you through with Mr. Gross, Mr. Leisman?
Yes.
One question I have for you, Mr. Gross. Do you know why Solon Township would give an electric permit to Mr. Fosberg for anything regarding building anything without a building permit?
The electrical permits are issued through the administrative assistant. The administrative assistant does not know whether he's putting the electrical in for whatever the project was. She is not aware of the fact that there's been a holdup on the building permit. So the fact that he applied for one, gave her an indication what he was doing with it, she issued the permit.
Well, I get that you're passing it off onto the administrative assistant, but wouldn't there be some communication in your office as to whether somebody gets an electrical permit? I mean,
Again,
it
Your
seems
Honor, I
weird
can't-
that it seems weird that you'd get an electrical permit when you're never going to have a building permit. What would you need the electrical for in some place that has nothing?
To my knowledge, they can issue a building permit simply on the fact that somebody is requesting one, maybe for something.
You're saying building and you mean electrical.
Sorry, electrical, yes.
Is that what did you misstate yourself?
Yes, I did.
Okay, sorry, I just want to be really clear. So really, electrical permits are given much more freely than a building permit.
That is correct.
Okay. Can you see where it could create problems by getting an electrical permit early? Or doesn't that ever come up?
It never comes up. It's never been a problem.
Okay. All right, any other question you have, Mr. Fosberg?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Do you want to call, thank you, Mr. Gross, you're through. Do you want
Thank
to
you.
call any other witnesses, Mr. Leisman?
No, Your Honor, a township would call to the stand Mr. Robert Alec.
Okay, we still have your name from before, E-L-L-I-C-K, Robert. Raise your right hand if you please. You do solemnly swear you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God, yes, ma'am.
Just on rebuttal, Mr. Leisman, what's the question?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Alec, you were here when Mr. Fosberg testified that he talked to you about access to the property before he bought the property. Were you here when he testified to that?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall discussing access to this parcel with Mr. Fosberg before he purchased it?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the court what you told him at that time?
I told him it was a bad idea to purchase the property because there was access trouble because of the bridge. I was very clear about it, and he indicated to me he didn't care. He was buying it anyway.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Fosberg, do you want to ask Mr. Ellick any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Alec, when I asked that what I found on my deed, it's showing a piece of easement going out to 22 Mile. He did at that time state to me that I
Is that
must
a
be on
question?
something.
Is it a
They did not
question?
know about that. Is that true? I guess, Mr. Alec, do you remember stating that you did not aware of anything going out to 22 Mile, and that I was probably onto something about not having to go across the bridge, if that was the case, really? You remember telling me that?
When you came to me with the documents or the information, I'm not sure you had any documents in your hand, but you indicated there might be a possibility that there was an easement there. I said, well, maybe that would be your way to access your land without going across the bridge, but you'd still have to build the road. Just because the easement's there doesn't automatically give you any access, give or take, either way. You still have to build the road. And I wasn't sure at that time, and I'm still not, it looks like it doesn't even touch Marsh Creek.
It's an overlapping easement. Marsh Creek's easement starts at the property line and goes one direction to the east. The easement that from Simmons there that I'm on starts at the property line and goes 20 foot to the east and 20 foot to the west. It's split on the property line. There's 20 foot of that easement that overlaps. The 20 foot of that easement that overlaps has been destroyed by all the drain tiles and all the drainage that goes through there.
You're kind of not asking a question at all, Mr. Fosberg. Mr. Fosberg, you're not really answering a question, asking a question.
Okay, Mr.
Hold on.
Okay, do you
try to put it in the form of a question?
Mr. Elliott, do you remember looking at the deed together with me when I walked in there and showed you that there is a private road? It is explained in the deed, a private road that runs from 22 Mile to Simmons. And you looked at that with me and said that I'm onto something. Do you not remember that?
I just explained that to you. There was an easement there. That doesn't make it a private road. You still, if you have legal access to that easement, you still have to build a road on it.
This question I'm asking, sir, is do you remember looking at the deed with me where I showed you that it said it was a private road and that it ran from 22 Mile to Simmons? We looked at it together.
Nope.
Okay. We did look at it together. That was one of the reasons that I made my decision was upon that.
Okay, all right, that's
and
fine.
it does say that on the deed that it was a private road, 40 foot wide. And it explains it in the
Okay, do you have any other questions for Mr. Ellick, Mr. Fosberg?
No.
Okay. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Leisman, for Mr. Ellick?
No, Your Honor.
Do you have any other witnesses for rebuttal?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You're excused as well, Mr. Ellick.
Thank you.
Mr. Fosberg, the way we started the case is the township goes first, then you went, then the township goes, and we're done now. But there is a lot of information on this that goes back when we started this from the beginning. And it's my turn now to really kind of get involved in putting everything together from my perspective. I don't want to stop the parties from giving a brief synopsis. If you want to give a final argument, it's not testimony, it's just talking like a summation or a summary. I've been really attentive, and I feel like I've listened very carefully and do understand a lot. I will premise my comments right now by saying we have spent a lot of time talking about whether the easement that Mr. Fosberg has on part of his property that could give him access to emergency vehicles to avoid the bridge being rebuilt was viable or not viable, is viable or not viable. We have spent inordinate amount of time talking about the zoning aspect of this case that you would expect in a zoning hearing and would get in a zoning hearing to determine whether you can make Marsh Creek and Simmons connect to do exactly what you thought you wanted to do, Mr. Fosberg. But that is not what I'm about. I'm not sitting here making a decision. Do I think the easement is going to work? And if it can work, what has to be done to make it work? That's not my role. My role is to make a determination on the zoning civil infraction violations. Did you have a permit to build that accessory building? Did you have a permit for the primary building before you build the accessory building? Did you violate the work stop orders? I'm not here to talk about, I mean, I still want to talk about at some point if this is fixable. If it's fixable. Because we've spent a lot of time talking about the easement, 30 foot, 15 foot on each side, goes to 40 foot, 20 foot on each side. Whether you need to have the neighbors agree or don't, whether you can change the road or whether you can't. Can you use that easement as an ingress, egress, even separate and apart from the setback requirements? But I'm not here to talk about whether you're going to get a zoning variance to do exactly what you wanted to do. So I'll give both sides very brief. We're getting close to lunch. I've been going all day. This case has been going on a really long time. We've given you more opportunities than we normally would, to be honest, Mr. Fosberg, when you didn't zoom in last time. But just give me a very brief few-minute wrap-up. Start with you, Mr. Leisman.
Sorry, I needed to unmute there, Your Honor.
I get it.
Ross Leisman on behalf of the plaintiff township. As the court recounted at the beginning of this hearing, we're here on 7 citations that were issued to Mr. Fosberg. Citations 185, 187, and 189 are misdemeanor citations issued for failure to comply with the stop work order under the construction code ordinance. And if the court would like, I can share screen and show that ordinance to the court.
No, I don't need to see it.
What that ordinance provides is that normal violations are civil infractions, except for, and this is common, as the court's aware, with most municipalities, Section 6 is failure to comply with the stop work order shall be a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of not more than $500 or imprisonment, and provision of any other violation is a civil infraction. And we believe this goes back to our earlier 3-hour hearing, but that the township clearly showed that Mr. Fosberg knew that he didn't have a permit for the house, he didn't have a permit for the building, went out and started construction, and the township went out and posted a stop work order on March 2. Went out there the next day or 2 days later, he had continued working, they posted another stop work order. He continued working, they posted another stop work order, and he continued working. And if the court will recall, we gave the court pictures of that progression, showing every time the stop work order posted, and then the additional work that went on as he continued to construct the building despite 3 stop work orders that were placed on him. And when I asked him questions today, he admitted under oath that he knew he didn't have a building permit for either the principal building or the accessory building. He admitted that he saw the stop work orders and that he purposely chose to ignore them. So township would respectfully submit that it's carried its burden of showing beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Fosberg violated the stop work orders on the 3 separate occasions as alleged in the citation. And then we have the 4 civil infraction cases. In the 4 civil infraction cases, 3 of them, case number 191, 192, and 194, are failure to obtain a building permit to go ahead with this construction. And 196 is constructing an accessory building without a principal building on the structure. If the court will recall, we showed those ordinances earlier to the court in the earlier hearings. The same evidence has come before the court that Mr. Fosberg actually approached the township before he started buying the property and was told that there was a problem with access. We showed the court the neighbors have had to go to the zoning board of appeals for the property above it. They know that they can't access that other road, that they have to come over that bridge, and that he knew there was a problem. He's admitted to you that he knew there was a problem with the bridge. He went ahead and bought it anyway. He applied for his building permits and he didn't get them. And he went ahead with construction anyway. And the same thing, township went out there, continued to construct, even though he knew he didn't have a permit. And he doesn't have a permit to construct a principal structure because he doesn't have access to the property that would allow that. So without going through all of the photographs that we went through at the first hearing, I think the evidence is clear by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Fosberg went ahead on those 3 dates with construction without permits and constructing an accessory building without permits. So we would ask for 3 verdicts of guilt on the 3 citations of constructing or ignoring a stop work order, and then responsibility on the 4 citations. So that would be 7 tickets, and we would ask for $500 of costs on each one. The township has way more than that into it. That would be $3,500 payable whenever the court deems appropriate. But then we still have the issue, Your Honor, like you said, of that he doesn't have access to this property. He bought it knowing that. He's gone ahead anyway. He's flaunted all of the requirements in front of him. So we would request that what the court do is also issue an order that he has 30 days to get a building permit on the principal residence. If he can't get a building permit on the principal residence, he can't get it on the accessory structure. So he would need to have that bridge certified by an engineer. Or I suppose if he can somehow get an easement or a road or something from the north, but he hasn't done that. And that if he can't get a building permit for the principal residence within 30 days, that then, I don't know if the court just wants to order it, or if we meet again, that he'd be ordered to take down the accessory building. And then if he does get a permit, we still have the issue that he has to be able to address the setback issue, either through a variance or moving the road or something like that. But the primary issue is he doesn't have legal access to the property. He knows it. He testified he brought in his building materials by a pickup over the bridge. This is a blatant violation of all the rules that are put in place for basic safety protection for residents of the township. So we would ask that, and then if he doesn't come up with it, that then the court order the building be taken down within a time deemed reasonable by the court, or authorize the township to hire contractors to have it torn down. And that's what happens when you ignore stop work orders. So that would be our request here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Leisman. Mr. Fosberg, you can go ahead and give your brief summary.
Okay. I knew there was access to there, and there is access to there. It says it right on my deed. There is that private road that comes from 22 Mile and goes to my road. It is called Marsh Creek by everybody else, not by them. But it still is listed on my deed as a private road, 40-foot wide, that goes from there to there. It's listed also in the levers. That there's a private road coming from 22 Mile going back there. They acknowledged it with me. They looked right at me and said, geez, we didn't know that. You're right. You can go across that. So I was told that I can go back there. I was told that I could build back there. I was told that I'm going to get my building permit. And every single time that I talked to them, until now, we're at court talking about it. They're saying that they didn't. But that is 100% untrue. I would have never spent that kind of money. I got over $60,000 on a piece of property that I didn't think I was going to be able to build on. No, I went down to the road commission. I got it from Mr. Cole is the senior specialist over there. He said the Marsh Creek is the same as Simmons. I went down to the register of deeds and I got 3 people's names right here. Then they're all telling me the exact same thing, that Marsh Creek is that road. That's the only reason I bought it. That is my access. And I knew that I have access before I purchased it. That's why I went through all that before I purchased it. I purchased it in February. I talked to them in December and in January. And I was already in there. I already put all my building permit stuff in January 17th. And I was issued an electrical permit for that barn even. And they told me they were only waiting on some paperwork. So, I was now aware that I was not getting it. They were 100% sure of me that I was getting it and I was not breaking any rules or doing anything wrong. I have access to that property by a road that comes from 22 Mile. And it's called a private road. It's 40-foot wide. Now, you're right, it does overlap, and there's issues where they didn't put the private road of Marsh Creek in where it was supposed to be. But according to, if they did what they were supposed to, in fact, the one map that he even showed you, it shows the cul-de-sac going way down past there, because that's where it was, that's where it was proposed to go in, but they just didn't put it in that way. But that's the township's problem, because they're the ones that were inspecting it. So this is what I feel is that I'm getting railroaded here is because the township broke a bunch of rules. They did whatever they wanted. And then now I'm the one that has to take and fix it, because according to their rules and regulations, you can't put a road in without getting it all okayed by their engineer. And then it's got to be okayed, and then it gets turned over, and it has to have a maintenance agreement. It gets turned over to the people that own the property there. So the road should never not be able to be accessed by emergency vehicles. It says, according to the maintenance agreement, that at all times it must be. So there's no reason why right now it should ever be not maintained enough where it isn't. And that's all I'm saying is that the township has basically bluntly lied to me, and it feels like I'm being discriminated on. And I think it's because of other issues. I had been recently in a divorce, and there was a lot of sticky stuff that went on. And basically, ever since then, Mr. Dodd has not really cared for me.
Well, I don't have any of the details of any of that, nor do I have any knowledge of any of that. But I don't doubt when you feel like you're being treated differently, that it's an awkward feeling. There's no question about it. I don't doubt that you feel the township didn't handle it the way they should have handled it. And you're certainly entitled to your opinion as it relates to that. I mean, let me just address what my role is, gentlemen. As the district judge, there are 7 different violations that we're dealing with, 3 of which are the violations regarding the failing to obtain a building permit, and 3 of which are failing to comply with the stop work order. The tickets that end in 185, 187, and 189 are all considered to be criminal misdemeanors, failing to comply with a stop work order. The civil infraction tickets of 191, 192, and 194 are the tickets for failing to obtain a building permit before beginning construction. So they're written under the ordinance from the township, failing to receive a building permit before beginning construction. It doesn't really talk about when you apply for it, but you have to receive it. Those are the 3 tickets. And then the 196 is the ticket that has to do with accessory structure that's not permissible without the principal use established. So that the fact that the accessory building that Mr. Fosberg calls the barn was being built and has been built prior to any principal building being established or the principal use. In other words, you have to have the permit to have the building of the principal or primary building. While Mr. Fosberg did give information about he's seen situations where they start building on the accessory before they build on the primary, the actual rule is you're supposed to have the primary built first, but without question, you have to have the permit granted and received to build the primary and to build the accessory. I said earlier, much of what we've talked about is the predicament that Mr. Fosberg finds himself in, that he thinks is just unfair treatment by the township. But if we listen to the record, Mr. Fosberg, you made assumptions. You used the terminology, I figured, I believed. I know that you were being told things by the township, and you relied on them to the extended degree that you went ahead, purchased this property. Purchasing the property in February of 2020, knowing that there was going to be an issue with the bridge not being accommodating for emergency vehicles, clearly discussed and talked to by the township representatives, but you figured that you had it taken care of because of the Marsh Creek and Simmons. And you can tell 100 times over, you looked at your deed and you could see the easement, and there was access, clear access. The problem is Marsh Creek, even though you believe, and the road commission can say it's the same as Simmons, we can't drive on it right now. We can't pull onto Marsh Creek and then pull onto Simmons. There has to be a road there for an ambulance or a rescue vehicle right this second to drive there. That has to be done before the permits to build are going to be granted. And you're right. You said there are some issues, Mr. Fosberg. There are some overlaps with the easement that have to be worked out. But you believed so fervently that you had access that it would take care of all these other problems. So being a builder of 15 years or whatever, your position was that you would get the permit. You would get the permit. So instead of waiting for the permit,
Ma'am, there is access there.
I'm going to just ask you to let me speak, and I get it. And I don't doubt you. I don't doubt that there's access, and I'm hoping you can work this out. But for you to see access on a deed map and say that means you have an access road to your property that's going to overcome having to fix the bridge for emergency rescue isn't the way it is right now. What I'm saying in this point is you put the horse before the cart. In my opinion, in almost every aspect of this. Maybe because you were so excited to finally build this home, you were so excited to finally have the lake access. It's a great property, whatever, I don't know. But construction occurred prior to obtaining the permit. It's absolutely a no-brainer for me. You started building this accessory building without ever obtaining receipt of the permit that says go ahead, that says you're good to build. No permit was ever obtained regardless of whether the application was made. And you even had knowledge that other neighbors had tried to build or were attempting to build and never got approval. After the stop order started, March 2nd, ticket 185, you went to the township and talked to them right away. Okay, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. Because that first stop order, you're saying is the first one you've ever experienced in your career? It says what it says. Failed, stop work. We saw a copy of it. Stop work immediately. It really pretty much tells you exactly what you're supposed to do. Your testimony, Mr. Fosberg, is you go to the township, they start asking for more information, they start asking for the survey, they want the survey to be stamped. Again, you testified. I figured I complied with what they wanted. I did with what they wanted, so when I went back to the site, the next day, the day after, we're in COVID, you decide you're going to keep working. For the tickets that were issued 2 days later, March 4, and the ticket for stop work order that was given on the 6th, by then you know something's up. This is not good. This is not good. I really believe you were trying to work as hard as you could to get it done so that by building it, you could avoid some of the problems that you're even dealing with now. When we talk about the civil infractions for failing to obtain a building permit, tickets 191, tickets 192, and 194, dated March 6th, March 4, and March 2. I find you responsible for all of them. You never had the permits you needed. They're civil infractions, you're responsible. It's like when I talked to the guy fishing without a license. You either have a license or you're not. You're either fishing or you're not. You either have the permit and you're constructing it, or you don't have the permit. You can't start constructing it. Here you don't have the permit and you construct it. You continue to construct it. And I don't know. I don't get the impression that it's immediate, blatant violation. I know better and they're wrong. And in the end, even now, I don't know what they're going to say as this case, if it continues. But you are responsible for failing to receive the building permit before beginning constructions. So on those three, number 191, not 192, and 194, you're responsible for the failing to comply with the stop work order. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt on the first ticket, March 2nd. I thought, okay, could there really be a misunderstanding? Could it be that simple that somebody doesn't get it? Even though Mr. Gross took it out there, or Mr. Ellick, and they posted it, it says what it says, you can read. You went to their office, you had a meeting. You, Mr. Fosberg, thought you fixed it. You figured you were good to go. Not so. 185 ticket, I'm finding you not guilty on. 187 and 189, 2 days later and 4 days later, respectfully, I'm finding you guilty. So 2 counts of failing to comply with a stop work order, criminal misdemeanor, guilty, guilty. The last ticket is a civil infraction for starting the accessory when the actual reference is an accessory structure that's not permissible without a principal use established. It perhaps feels repetitive to you, Mr. Fosberg, and maybe it is, but it's a completely separate rule where you cannot start an accessory building without having the principal use established. And again, there's no permit given on the primary principal residence. So 196 ticket is also responsible. So of the 7 tickets, really the only one I found you not guilty on is 185. And that was the March 2nd ticket for the work stop order, because I just thought maybe you didn't understand what they were talking about. But then after hearing all the evidence, I really felt clear that you did understand. And to this day, and you can disagree with me, that's your prerogative, certainly, I respect that. To this day, you believe there's a way for you to have access to your property and gain a valid building permit to do what you originally wanted to. Much of what we talked about in this hearing over the last month and a half, several hours of testimony, was what I indicated early. More of a zoning discussion about how you get approval to do what you wanted to do. That's not what I'm about here. I don't make the zoning decisions. I don't give you clearance on a setback requirement. I don't give you authority to reconfigure, if that's the proper word, on the easement from Marsh Creek to Simmons. Even, and I know you believe in your heart of hearts that there is legal access. It is not a road right now. Certainly not a road that can accommodate what we're talking about for emergency equipment and other resources, even building the house. You wouldn't be able to use that easement from Marsh Creek to Simmons to bring the truckloads of equipment in. Having said that, you always felt that you were 100% sure, Mr. Fosberg, that you'd get the permit. And you based all of your actions on that, in my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah. And what I am saying is you were
There's the
wrong
easement
on
there.
your assumption. You were wrong on your assumption. I don't think it was done out of malice. Personally, I don't think that. I think you bought this property without doing all your homework, because you would not be in the position you're in right now if that would have been more thoroughly done. Clearly, construction occurred prior to the permits being obtained. To this day, the permits have not been obtained. The stop orders, at least the second and third one I'm saying, were completely ignored. In my opinion, for the most part, you were going to get this done. My position at this point is to look at what options are available as to how to have compliance. Because all I want is compliance. Normally, the discussion was that there's 6 to 7 days for when a turnaround time can be on a work permit to get a building permit on a property. Well, it's been 11, 10 months, and it hasn't happened. You're talking, Mr. Leisman, about 30 days. 30 days to get a principal permit on the residence. 30 days to get a permit on the accessory building. Both of them are going to need the same ingress, egress requirements. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Leisman?
Yes, Your Honor.
So whether the permit's going to be for the primary residence or the permit's going to be for the accessory building that's already been built, we can't get one with, there's not going to be one without the other. I mean, if you can't get the primary building permit, there's no way the accessory permit's going to be granted. And they don't give you an accessory permit before they give you the permit on the primary permit. Neither are going to work if you cannot get this resolved as it relates to the ingress and egress from the way you believe it to be, not having to rebuild the bridge. And yeah, I didn't ask how many neighbors coming up Marsh Creek there are, how many neighbors there are on Simmons. And I don't doubt that neighbors would have been talking at that meeting in March about what's he doing and what's he going to do with the road and how can he do that and does it change it. In any kind of a zoning situation, they give notice to neighbors that are, I don't know, within a quarter mile of something that might be changed. But just because the easement is listed on the deed doesn't mean you can drive the truck right to your lot right now. That's separate and distinct from the issue of the setback requirement, because you have to meet all the requirements. It's not just a little bit. You have to be in compliance in every aspect before you get the building permit. It has to be approved, and you never got approval. So what I want to say is we're almost at the end of October. I'm saying at the end of this calendar year. I don't know how the township works with their meetings. I know COVID has put a slowdown to everything. I want to put this to the end of the year before I make a decision what happens with that accessory building. Whether you go ahead and apply, you've got to have a permit to build the house. You've got to have a permit to build the accessory building. That's already built. The last thing I want to do is order that the building be dismantled. But that could be the exact position that you took, Mr. Fosberg, that if you built it, nobody's going to make you take it down. I can't promise that. I don't know what the adage is about asking for forgiveness later, but sometimes there's a saying about, I'll do it, and then ask for forgiveness later. I can't remember it, but you probably guys know what I'm talking about. There's some statement like that sometimes people just don't ask. They just do it, and then they'll say, I'll ask for forgiveness later. I'm not trying to say you're asking for forgiveness, Mr. Fosberg. Don't misunderstand me, because I know you believe you're right. I understand your point, and that you believe you're right. What I'm telling you and what I found by today's hearing is you did it wrong. You could have a big beef with the township, and like you said, you think they railroaded you. I'm saying you're educated, you understand, you're a builder, you know the rules probably better than a lot, You can't start building without the permit. Clearly can't build the accessory without the primary building established. And my position is you put the cart before the horse. I'm waiting, Mr. Leisman, to make any final decision on sentencing. I'm not going to say he has to apply for a permit. I don't know what Mr. Fosberg's going to do. But I'm willing to go to the end of the year to see what investigation, and I suggest you get an attorney, Mr. Fosberg, somebody that can walk you through the legal aspects of this, which should have probably been done when you bought the place with the realtor. But my point is, whether the township gives you a permit to build or not, I have nothing to do with. That's not part of this lawsuit. Whether they grant the permit or not. You certainly have a right to pursue it and prove that you can. But there are a number of things that need to be done for them to be able to approve it. I'm sure it's frustrating. I'm sure it causes anxiety and difficulties for everybody. But that's my position. So I would like to set it up for sentencing at the end of the year. That gives you, every bit of 60 days plus. And you got to start right away because this is not going to be easy. It's going to be paperwork. It's going to be trying to deal with difficulties of getting all, you know what it's like because you've been trying to do it. Talk to somebody that has some expertise in this area because I think you need some assistance. I'm not saying you can't do it by yourself. I'm just saying I think it would be helpful because in the end, if you don't have a permit to build your residence, I'm not going to be allowed to let the accessory building be there. And what does that mean? I don't think those are physically easy to physically get up like a house in our neighborhood that was put up on blocks and they physically moved the house. That's pretty rare. I don't know. I don't know the prospect of that. Or if you're $60,000 separate from what you bought for the land, whatever cost for the accessory building costs money to dismantle. But look into it. I'm setting it up for a date. Right now, you can just do an order, Mr. Leisman, of my initial finding of 2 counts, guilty of the failing to comply with the work stop order, and the 4 civil infraction responsible, with the only ticket being found not guilty is 185. Clear?
Yes, sir. 2 questions. One, since 2 of them are criminal and 4 civil infractions, you have 2 separate orders. The criminal in one order and civil infraction in another, or do you want them all?
I'm not sure how many times I've had them be together, but to be honest with you, I have no problem with that. I have the discretion not to move forward with sentencing on any of them, and my intent is to do all of it at the same time.
Okay. And then my other just request would be is that the hearing either be before Christmas or after the New Year because I'm gone that week in between.
I'm sure a lot of people have schedules and I'm just like, we'll just have to deal with it. I just want to put something toward the end of the year so that Mr. Fosberg knows he's on a strict timeline.
Right.
All right,
So
Mr. Fosberg, we'll work with everybody on that. I mean, if it's the first week of January, so be it. I don't know, maybe. I don't want to cut him short if he needs the time, but, we all have schedules, so we'll just deal with it. I get what you mean. All right, Mr. Fosberg, do you have any questions about what I've said?
No, Your Honor.
I appreciate your courtesy, and I appreciate your courtesy, Mr. Leisman, and your witnesses by zooming in yet again. Finally, I just want to say that from the October 7th hearing, I'm making a decision not to enter any court costs against Mr. Fosberg for missing that appointment. I just made that decision myself within my own discretion. I'm choosing not to add attorney fees on that. It'll be completely separate and distinct from the decision the court makes on finances, financial fines, and costs regarding both the 4 civil infractions and the 2 misdemeanors. Okay?
I'll submit
Okay,
a-
everybody.
Okay.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Yep, thank you. You can all disconnect. We'll be in touch with everybody.